So tonight's session is around Parent Council AGM training. You will hear from myself, Leanne McGuire, I'm Chair of Glasgow City Parents Group, and Kathryn Farrow, who is the lead of the Parent Partnership at Education Services. This is a reminder as well that you will find tonight's slides and recording in the description of the YouTube video. And the same with any of our other videos. This is one of many of a suite of training videos. So just look on our YouTube videos for the rest. I'm going to pass straight over to Kathryn to get started.
Thanks, Leanne. Pleasure to be delivering another session with Glasgow City Parents Group. So, what is the role of the Parent Council? Always worth revisiting, despite the fact that we've had Parent Councils now for a long, long time. And you know, people come and go, so membership changes, and that's why it's important to always go back and look at the main messages. So your Parent Council is a group of parents selected by members of the Parent Forum, who are all parents and carers in the school, to represent their views. And people get confused with that terminology. So Parent Forum is the big group, it's everybody, and Parent Council is the small group that is selected by all parents to represent them. Now, to do this, the Parent Council must talk and listen to parents at the school. And that's a real challenge because, you know, we have got Parent Council members are volunteers. They're doing this in their spare time, often in combination with a busy job and raising their own children. But it's important that the group sits down and actually thinks about how they are communicating to the Parent Council and how they are hearing from them. So the next slide looks quite old now. 2017 was, you know, quite a while ago, but we have to remember that we had the pandemic in the middle. So there was a review of the Parental Involvement Act 2006, which is still the legislation that governs parent councils. And what they found was that across the country, not just in Glasgow, but across the whole country, it was reported that parent councils could do a better job of representing the views of all parents. So to do that, there's a need to raise awareness about the role and function of parent councils, and that more effective and frequent two-way communication between parent councils and the wider parent forum is required. And you need to talk to each other about what is the best way to do that, because not everybody will want to be on a Facebook page or they'll want to be on a WhatsApp group. So it's about maybe having frequent methods, but there needs to be a desire to actually make this work and to spend some time at a meeting looking at how you can actually communicate to and hear from the parents that you represent. So here are the things that a parent council must do. And there's not an awful lot of things that they must do, but you have to operate in an open manner. Sometimes parents will say, I joined the parent council because I wanted to find out what was going on. That would indicate that the parent council isn't operating as it should, because any parent in the school should know what the parent council is discussing on their behalf, whether they're at meetings or not. So you have to be open and transparent. So to do that, good starting point, inform all parents who the members are and how the group can be contacted. So today I saw a parent council putting posters up around a school with a QR code that parents could access, and it took them to all the information about the parent council. You need to provide a copy of the constitution to the head teacher. All parents in the school could ask to see that, and a constitution isn't agreed until all parents have, you know, at least been asked for input. And you'd be amazed at the number of times I go into schools and they ask if I've got a copy of the constitution because nobody can find it. So it's important to have that because that is the set of rules. So the parent council must also present a coordinated and collective voice back to the school through consultation with the parent forum. And that's hard to do, but that's why the communication is so important, because it's not just the views of the 4 or 5 people that come to meetings. Those views are important, but they are not representative. So, you know, the parent council needs to actually speak to parents to learn what their views are. So as an example, a school was saying that there's been a lot of complaints about, you know, what kids are getting for lunch, and parents are not using the online ordering. So the parent council is going to go off and do a survey of parents to find out what the barriers are to that so that they can come to a parent council meeting a bit more informed about why that system isn't working. And one of the absolute have-tos is that the Parent Council must report back to the Parent Forum at least once per year at the AGM. And some of that slipped a little bit during COVID, but largely that is back on track. So an AGM and a report to all parents at that is an absolute must. So there's links. It's good, you need to remember that not all parents will come to your AGM, but you have to report to them. So doing that in written format doesn't have to be complex. We've given you exemplars of how you can do it, and you'll see that it's largely a one-page report, and the accounts would go on the back of that. So all of these links are accessible, in the slide deck. So policies to have in place and review at your AGM. Your constitution, just checking that it's fit for purpose. Is there anything that needs to change in that constitution? And that would be the time to make it. So you would have to let all parents in the school know about the changes you're going to make. So for example, if you had a maximum number of 8 on your parent council, but you wanted to change it to having a maximum of 12 members, you would have to put that amendment out and ask for people to give their comments. Generally, they're not going to have a problem with simple issues like that, and you just take their silence as confirmation that you can go ahead. You give them a cut-off date and get them to respond by that cut-off date, or thereafter the change will be made. Code of conduct and all these other policies are really important to consider, and consider the code of conduct before problems arise. Don't try to put one in place once you've got problems, because it's just not going to work. So again, we've got lots of samples. Once the first school wrote it, and once Leanne's group got involved, we had exemplars. You can take those exemplars, but you need to discuss them with your members to make sure that they actually suit your situation. So your parent council constitution, what is it? Why do we need it? What's it need to look like, and who can change it? So your parent council constitution is basically your set of rules. So it's your governance document laying out the functions and operations of your parent council. It sets out the aims and objectives of your group, and it's a key document which formalises your group. So all the things that would be in there would be about how many members, what's your minimum number of members, what's your maximum number of members, how long are people going to serve in the parent council, are you going to vote if more than one person's interested in a role, or are you going to randomly select? You need to get all of that laid out in your governance document, which is your constitution. So why do you need it? Well, parent councils will be sitting around thinking, oh, we've been on the parent council now for 3 years, should we be stepping down? So it defines how your parent council will function, and it makes sure that you're complying with the legislation. And the parent councils were set up on the back of government legislation, the 2006 Act, or the Scottish Schools Parental Involvement Act 2006 to give it its full name. And that, is a really important piece of legislation. You can see it hasn't changed over all of that time. So it tells us that we need to do certain things, and your governance document would clearly define the role and remit of the parent council in your individual school. And it's that clear and consistent process for when conflicts or difficulties arise. And I regularly refer parent councils back to their constitution, because they'll sit in the meeting. Today I was in a school and they weren't all that clear how long, or what the minimum number of members would be, because the numbers have dropped, and they need to go back and actually look at the document for that difficult situation to make sure that they can actually continue to function. So it's a set of rules for everybody to adhere to, and if these rules are followed, then it means there are far fewer problems. So it needs to be concise, accessible and easy to read, and I've got lots of examples of that type of constitution. Leanne has shared them on the Glasgow City Parents Group chat. There's lots of links to these documents on the various communication channels, so you don't have to start from scratch. Look at other people's and tweak and amend for your own. your own circumstances. So what are you set up to do? And generally that will be about supporting the work of the school. And to support the work of the school, you have to put parents' views into that mix. It will tell you about the powers of the Parent Council, who can be members, how long members will serve, all of these things I've gone over, making decisions and making changes. So all in the rules. So have a revisit of your Parent Council constitution and make sure that yours is fit for purpose. And if you need any help, I'm here to help, and the Glasgow City Parents Group's there to help. So when can you change it? So you discover your Parent Council constitution maybe needs a bit of adapting. So you would get a small group, generally the current Parent Council, who would sit down and look at it, but you can't make those changes without getting everybody to comment. So you would maybe put it up on a website, or you would send a link to it. You would do something to let all parents and carers know what changes you were going to make, ideally just ahead of your AGM. And then when you get either comments back from parents or you get the silence that means that it's all fine, you can take it to the AGM and confirm that you've had no comments back, and those changes can then be incorporated, and that becomes your new Parent Council constitution. Or if you need to do it out with the AGM, you'd have a special meeting, but you would still have to go and do a process of consultation and get that ratification from the parent forum. You can't sit there waiting for 200 parents to get back to you. So you would always ask the question, are you happy with the change? If not, let us know by the cut-off date. So that's how to make changes to it.
Okay, it's over to me now, Kathryn, for the other kind of important documents and policies. And just one thing to kind of say about the Constitution, because again, we always get asked, like, what is the best way to do that ratification? So the way I would probably advise that you do it is you discuss your suggested changes at your Parent Council meeting. So that's probably a meeting or two before your AGM meeting. Discuss your changes, type the suggested changes up, and then the same way you send out your invite in advance of your AGM, so it's normally about 2 weeks in advance, you would send out a copy of the suggested changes to your constitution. Now, obviously you're not going to print all of that out and send out a copy to every parent, so if you maybe share it on your social media channels or through email, or you put it on like a school app or somewhere where everyone is able to view it and see it, and then you would ask anyone if they've got any objection to these changes, that they would come back to you at the AGM about it. But like as Kathryn said, hopefully at your AGM it's just a case of, is everybody happy with these changes, and it's a yay or nay and you move on. So the next most important document, I cannot stress this enough, is a code of conduct. So whilst your constitution gives you a kind of brief overview of the aims and objectives of the group, the code of conduct is a bit more your do's and don'ts and your rules of how the group runs. So the code of conduct will give a clear definition of the expected behaviour and conduct of members in relation to the role representing the Parent Council. And so you can see just from that statement alone how important it is, because we're all different personalities, we're volunteers, some people don't go on with others as well as they do other people. And with the very best of intentions, issues can arise. But if you have got all of these policies and your constitution and everything in place, then you have got a set of rules that you can easily follow. And it takes the personal element out of it, because it means then that your poor chairperson or your vice chair isn't left to make all the decisions if you've got it all clearly set out. The code of conduct also sets out how breaches of this code will be resolved and by whom. That's really, really important, because in any given lifetime of a parent council, there will always be something that goes wrong. Whether it's deliberate or not, I'll leave that to you to decide. But say it's something like in a meeting, someone says something derogatory towards one of the members, and it's really awkward, and then you as a chairperson or as a secretary or whatever, you're thinking, I don't know how to deal with this situation. Well, then you don't have to think about how to deal with it yourself if you've already got it clearly set out. And also it means that there's an expectation of everyone how they should be behaving and what happens if anything does go wrong. So again, all these, we've got examples of all of this coming up in a slide, and a few slides yet. And there's a link through, and it takes you through to an example of all of these suggested policies, a few constitutions, and the code of conduct, and you can easily just lift out of there what's appropriate to you. Just copy, paste it, and tweak it to whatever works for you. So a social and digital media policy, again, this is an absolute must for every PTA or parent council, particularly after the pandemic. If you weren't using social media to communicate through your parent council, then you certainly were afterwards. And by social media, I also include WhatsApp, because I think some people forget that that's actually a social media app. So if you are using any form of social media for your parent council communications or your PTA communications, then you need to have this policy in place. So this policy would detail what social media channels that you use and what online platforms the parent council use to communicate with the parent forum. So you would list everything on there that you do use. It also defines how any administrators of these channels must manage and the content is shared. It also outlines how members should conduct themselves online. So again, it kind of goes back to that code of conduct a wee bit, but this is specifically to do with social and digital media. So your email could also come under this. And if you use something like Google Drive or anything, it can also come under this. It also reminds members of the implied duty of trust and confidence between the school and the parent council. And again, that is something that you kind of build up over the years as a parent council. You do build up that good relationship with your school. And if you've got a new member that maybe comes in, doesn't quite know what they're doing, and then posts something inappropriate onto the parent council social media channels, then your digital media policy should have been in place before that, because then that member would never have been in that position to do that by accident. They would know what the expectations were of them. And the same with if you've got like a Facebook page or a Facebook group, you might want to consider setting rules for any social media that you do use, and you get everyone to agree to those rules before they start using them. And you can also do that with your parent forum. So whatever channel you're using, you can also list your rules and pin them to the top of your profile. And then it just means generally it's 3 strikes and you're out kind of thing. But it means that everybody knows what behaviour is expected of them. Basically, they can't come back and say, oh, I didn't know I wasn't allowed to do that. So some additional policies that you might want to consider. These are not all essential, but it's just something that you might want to consider. A complaints policy, again, I would highly recommend. You might be going through life thinking, why would we need a complaints policy for the parent council? We've never received a complaint about our parent council, but you never need it until you need it. So it's always good to have these things in place so that if that incident ever did arise, you're not running around going, oh, how do we deal with this? You know exactly how to deal with it because you've got a set of rules or you've got a process in front of you. Child protection policy, this one is a bit of a just if you need it. It's more so probably for primary parent councils, because if you're hosting like school discos or events where you're in charge of the children with the help of the school, then you might want to put a child protection policy in place just to protect yourselves as parent council members and volunteers, and also for the safety of the pupils that you're in charge of. A data protection policy, again, that's probably another essential one, because as parent councils, just by the nature of your business, you will be collecting people's personal data, whether that is the email addresses and phone numbers of your members, or sometimes you might actually be creating your own mailing list for parents. So you'll be collecting in phone numbers and names and email addresses of them. But definitely, I would be surprised if you're not collecting personal data of some sort. So a data protection policy should be in place, and generally that policy is about making sure that when you are collecting that data, that you're storing it in a secure manner. because again, that could come back to bite you. So if you are collecting a mailing list of email addresses, make sure that's not just lying about the place on a bit of paper, that you're storing it securely, ideally password protected, not on a shared device, or if it isn't a shared device, that it's in a secure folder, all that kind of stuff. So again, there's another example of that within the link at the bottom there. And an equality and fairness policy, again, it's just whether you want to have that or not. And there is another example there, and that's just another kind of set of rules about trying to be respectful and fair to your fellow members. So there is examples of all of these policies and constitutions in that link at the bottom. Go in, have a look, check that your current policies are up to date. And I would also recommend that you continuously review all of these. Now, what we tend to do at Glasgow City Parents Group that's helpful is when we create any of these policies or when we review them, we issue a copy to all of our members, our committee members, and I have an email statement that I will then send to all those committee members, and that statement says, I, Leanne McGuire, have read and understood and agreed to all of the following policies. And then I list all of the policies and I put a yes or a no beside it. And what happens is each of the members then send that statement back to me. They would replace my name with their name, and then they would select yes or no to each policy. When I get that response back, I file that response and I keep a record of the member's name and the date that they sent me that response. And then that's them basically saying, yep, I've read all that and I know what it means and I agree to it. So then if anything did happen where something went a bit haywire or a bit wrong, then you can go back to them and say, well, I did give you this policy and you said you read it. Now, whether they read it or not, you have no control over that, but they're agreeing that they have read it. So they can't then come back and say, I didn't know about that. I didn't know that I had to do it that way. I didn't know we weren't allowed to share that information or whatever the incident is. And that's a really good bit of housekeeping to be able to keep track of all of this so that everybody knows what's expected of them on the Parent Council and how they're supposed to behave. So now you know what an AGM is and what should be included in it. How do we organise the meeting? So just some things to think about. That's your advertising of it. Again, putting out probably one tweet on X, as it's now called, probably doesn't really suffice as advertising your AGM. So make sure that you're advertising it as far and wide as possible to your parent forum. You'll need to decide on where you're going to hold your AGM, if it's online, in person. Try and create some engaging invites. Who's going to host and chair? You might want to think about some meeting etiquette, particularly if it's an online meeting, and what communication are you going to use from the Parent Council about it. So I'm going to quickly run through some of these things. So advertising your AGM to your wider parent forum. You can either do that through email, so either through your own Parent Council email if you have a mailing list set up, or if you send an email to the school and ask them to send it out to all the parents that they have through email. You can also advertise it on social media. You can tell these slides were done a while ago because it's still the blue bird and not a white X. You can do it the conventional way. If you want to pay for printing, you can stick a letter in the school bag and send that home with the pupils. Or many of the schools over the last few years have put some sort of school app in place. So whether it's Seesaw, Showbie, Piota, Show My Homework, Teams. I mean, I don't think there's a school across Glasgow that doesn't have some sort of communication app for pupils or parents. So if you ask the school nicely, could they maybe put something out on that app? That might be a good bet of trying to make sure that you reach the biggest audience. Or it might be that you choose to do a a variety of these things to try and reach as many people as possible. So in terms of the venue and the time of day, again, I would always ask you to maybe kind of revisit that every couple of years. Don't always assume that what time of day suits you suits everybody. So maybe something that you could ask every couple of years, is this time of day and venue suitable for you? So is it best to hold it maybe during the day, particularly in a primary school? You might want to hold it about 2 o'clock in the afternoon so that parents are already there for home time. Or is it best to hold it in the evening? Again, you might need to think about working parents, or if parents have got young children for childcare, are they able to bring them along with them? Do they have babysitters, etc.? Or you might want to think about holding it virtually. I mean, I know a lot of us were all quite keen to get back to the face-to-face meetings, but sometimes virtual is just as good because it actually opens it up to a lot more people. Because all those barriers of babysitting and transport and things, holding a meeting virtual can sometimes take those barriers away. So just think of the benefits of each and which one would encourage the most attendance. And think about removing as many barriers as possible so that you are trying to be as inclusive as possible. But you can't please everybody all of the time, so don't stress yourself out about it. But I think as long as you're seen to be making an effort to try and be as inclusive as you possibly can, then that's all we can ask of you as volunteers. So advertising your AGM, I'll be honest with you, I see it all the time where I see a one-line tweet or a Facebook post or something that's one line saying, St. Joseph's Primary Parent Council invites you to the AGM on Thursday, the 3rd of October. I see that going out all the time, and sorry to pick on like St. Joseph's, I don't mean used directly, but that's not engaging. If I saw that as a meeting, it's not going to entice me to come along. And so ask yourself that when you're putting this communication out. What would encourage you to attend this meeting if you didn't already know anything about the Parent Council? So you might want to make an eye-catching invite, something that is a bit more engaging, something that gives all the information of the AGM. You might want to include some of your agenda points on the invite, because there will be certain topics that will be more attractive to your parents than others, and it might entice new members to come along. And let's face it, as parent councils, we are always looking for new members, particularly around AGM time. So there's a free tool that you can use online called Canva, and it's an online app. It's free to sign up to, and you can create some lovely graphics to make your invite a lot more enticing. It's really handy as well for creating graphics for social media or posters for fundraising or discos. You can create everything in it: posters, videos, presentations. Everybody that I've put onto it, I've seen that they've became Canva kings and queens across social media. So it's a really great free tool that we can use to try and make our meeting invites in particular more enticing. So the meeting, if you're going to go with the online option, then remember your meeting link can be shared in a variety of different ways, because again, we want to try and remove the barriers for participation. So two options are: you can either ask the parents to email the parent council to get the meeting link sent out to them, which is probably the most obvious way of doing it. Or what you can do is just send the meeting link out through the school, through an email list or through group call, because you know that that is going directly to parents. The school's not emailing anybody who's not a parent or carer. So let's take out the barrier of the parent and carer having to contact you for the link, and let's just send it to them directly anyway. You could also, if you've got a big school and you know that you get a lot attending your AGM, you might want to use a registration platform like Eventbrite. So if any of you have been to any of our events, you'll see that you get the meeting invites or the webinar invites through Eventbrite. That's free to use. It takes a lot of admin out of you sending out reminder emails. However, I wouldn't suggest it if you don't have large attendance at your meetings, because it can take a wee bit of time to set it up, and it might just be as quick for you to send out 4 or 5 emails than it is to set up an Eventbrite. But that option is there if you get quite a lot of people coming along to your events, and I would be happy to talk you through how to set that up if you do choose that option. And just like I'd said with the meeting invite, share your agenda in advance with discussion topics that will draw people in. Again, just always put yourself in their shoes, and if you didn't know anything about the Parent Council, would you attend this meeting on the information that you're providing them? So there will be certain topics there that you will know that's important to your school, and that might be something that you want to put on your agenda to try and encourage parents and carers to come along and join in. So we're still sticking with the online meeting information at the moment. If you are going to go with an online option, whether that's on Zoom, Google Meet, Teams, whatever platform it is that you use, test and practice beforehand, because me and Kathryn will probably, well, hopefully we make this look easy, but we've been doing this for some time now, and I do this like about 10 times a day in my job. If online meetings is not something that you're fully confident in, then do a wee test session, set up a separate meeting, jump on with some of your Parent Council members and quickly go through your agenda and make sure everybody knows what their roles are. This is your meeting etiquette that you could put out in advance before anybody joins the online meeting. So ask everyone to stay on mute unless otherwise instructed. And a wee tip, see if somebody isn't putting themselves on mute, you can do it for them. As the meeting host, you can hit that mute button for them on most of these platforms, because there is nothing worse when you're trying to conduct a meeting and you can hear somebody in the background on the phone to their pal or shouting at their kids or something. So just put anybody on mute that isn't already. It might also be helpful to send out some etiquette in terms of how you want to run your meeting. So things like when it's an online AGM, we wouldn't normally invite anybody from the parent forum to step up and start asking questions or talking, because it could derail your AGM. So in advance, you might want to say to them, if there's any discussion points or any questions you have, please send them to us as the Parent Council in advance, and one of the members can then ask the head teacher on your behalf, or can raise the point on your behalf. So generally on an online meeting, members of the parent forum that are coming along are generally there to observe the meeting, because then it can get a wee bit out of hand if loads of people are trying to chip in and your time can run over. In person, it might be a bit easier to be able to do that, but it's entirely up to you however you want to chair your meeting. But just make sure again that you're being inclusive and that you're being fair. So if you're not going to let people speak on the night, that you're giving them an opportunity to feedback in advance so that you can speak on their behalf. Use the waiting room function on any of these platforms. Some of it is put in place by default. One thing I would say is remove the need for a passcode. It's really annoying. All you need is the meeting link, and if you've got a waiting room already set up, the people won't come, the attendees won't come straight into the meeting, so they don't need a passcode as well. The passcode is just another barrier, and if you've got a parent who's not particularly technically minded, or maybe English is an additional language, you want to remove every barrier possible for them to access this meeting. So you do not need a passcode as well as your meeting room, so you can remove that. I would also suggest for you to have a co-host or two to help you manage the chat and watch for raised hands. So if you're chairing the meeting, it's going to be really difficult for you to let people in from the waiting room, check their names off, put people on mute, follow your agenda. So ideally, you would have a co-host and somebody managing your waiting room or managing the chat as well. So there'd be 2 or 3 of you kind of manning the meeting. Instruct all members at the start of the meeting to change their display name. So I know this isn't as easy on some platforms as it is on others, but certainly on Zoom it's quite straightforward, and I've shown you a wee screenshot of where you would change their name, or what I tend to do if the participants themselves can't do it, because depending on their device, it might not be so obvious. I ask them to put their full name into the chat. And so if they put their full name into the chat, you can either take a register from them, or you can change the display name for them on your side. And it just means you know who's on the call and who you're talking to. And like I've already said about the points beforehand, seek any questions that want to be raised in advance, and then you as a parent council can raise them on behalf of the parents and carers. So in-person meeting now, be welcoming. Maybe consider putting on some biscuits and tea and coffee. It's amazing the amount of parent councils that I've just gone along to help, and actually they don't maybe say hello to you when you first come in, particularly if you're a new member. So remember, if you see a new face in the room, introduce yourself, say who you are, introduce your members, ask them who their name, what year their child's in. And particularly if the parent is an EAL parent where English is not their first language, be mindful of that. Remember that they're not going to be able to come in and sit down in this meeting and follow it from the start. So make sure you're checking in with them and that you're asking them, like, do they understand what's being discussed? Maybe even partner them up with an existing parent council member. I done that last night at our own AGM, where we had a new parent who'd come in. His English wasn't particularly good, but throughout the meeting I just kept kind of leaning over and saying to him, are you following this okay? Do you need help with anything? And there were times where I had to explain things to him, or I had to kind of point him where we were on the agenda. So just be mindful of that, because it's quite daunting come along to your first parent council meeting. And if you're coming along and English isn't your first language and you don't have a clue what's going on in the meeting room, you could feel quite excluded. So try and be as inclusive as you possibly can. Try to provide copies of the agenda or display the agenda in the room. Again, think about the environmental impact. Don't print off like 100 copies if you know there's only going to be 5 of you turning up. And ask those who are attending if they'd like to share their contact details to keep informed about future meetings. So AGMs are a great place to try and recruit more members. And actually last night, what my parent council do when we have an AGM, they have an online form. So you can create that through Microsoft or Google. And at the end of every AGM, they have a QR code that even the existing members and new members all need to scan. We go on, we give our name, our email address, our phone number, our child's name and the child's year group. We tick to say that we agree to the code of conduct, and we tick to say that it's okay to contact us. And that's a really great, straightforward way of being able to collect that information securely and hopefully sign up new members in the process. And use your AGM as an opportunity to sell the parent council successes and encourage new parents to join. So remember, you are reps of that parent council, and it is your job to communicate about the parent council and sell the benefits of joining the parent council. So that being said, if you have new members or your parent council forum, they need to be able to contact you, and that needs to be clearly advertised as well throughout the year, not just at the AGM, because you have a duty to represent the views of your parent forum. So how can you represent the views of your parent forum if you're not speaking to them? So make sure that you've got a parent council email address. So if you've got a generic parent council email address, that's much easier to remember as a parent who wants to contact you than if you've got your personal email address that you're putting out there. And also, I don't know about you, but I certainly wouldn't be happy about sharing my personal email address all over social media or in school newsletters. So this way, it gives you your privacy as an individual on the parent council. It makes it much easier for the parent forum members to contact you, and it's just good general housekeeping, because then when you move on as parent council chair or secretary, whoever, then it's the existing parent council email address that's still there, regardless of who is a member or not. But if you're using your personal one and you move on, all that information moves on with you, because I'm sure you're not going to sit and go through your personal email and forward all those emails onto somebody else. So it's general good housekeeping. So make sure that you've got a parent council generic email address set up. Don't need to get too fancy with it. You literally say St. Paul's Parent Council at gmail.com or whatever kind of version of that you want to make it. Just make it simple and easy to copy if a parent's looking at it. This, if you set up Gmail in particular, so I'm a champion for Gmail in terms of parent council emails, because see, if you set up a Gmail account, it gives you access to a whole other bunch of apps. So if you've got your generic email address, it will help you keep track of policies and constitutions. Also, any discussions that happen throughout the year, any fundraising, it's all in that generic email. And there's no point in reinventing the wheel. So it means as well that you've got a record of all your posters, your surveys, your templates. But again, if that's a personal email and that person moves on to a different school, you've lost all that. So if you set up a Gmail as your generic email address for your parent council, it gives you access to G Drive, which all these links that you see in these slides, including the slides themselves, they're all stored in our G Drive. And you can go into folders or even just a document itself, and you can change the permission, and you can either share that with anyone with the link, or you can keep that private for just you and your parent council members. It also gives you access to Google surveys. So that's a great free way of being able to canvass your parents, collect their views in. It gives you access to Google Calendar, so you can keep track of meetings and you can send out meeting invites. It gives you access to YouTube. It gives you access to Google Docs. So it's free and it gives you access to a lot of stuff. Now, what I would say is there will come a point though that the storage will fill up. It does give you quite a big free storage. So it might be beneficial to invest in an external hard drive where you could archive anything that you're not using. Or if you do want to pay for it, you can include in your parent council costs additional storage on Google. We pay something like £1.59 a month for additional storage for us, because as you can imagine, Glasgow City Parents Group does store quite a lot in our folders. But there's ways around that where you don't have to pay for it. But in terms of all the additionality that you get with Google, I'd highly recommend it over any other email provider. And that's it really. So that is your AGM training. Like I said, the link to the slides is in the description of the YouTube video. And this is only one of many other resources that we've got on our YouTube channel. So make sure you have a look down all the other videos, and hopefully all that information is helpful for you to run a successful parent council.